Alrighty, we're back here with the Q&A. Let's get on to the first question of the day. I know you've previously said that neck training is corny, but what about combat sports athletes like wrestlers? I do think there's some utility for any sport that has head impact, whether that's American football, rugby to a lesser extent, definitely boxing, wrestling, or any sort of mixed martial arts. But that said, man, if you want to train your neck, just train your neck. Yes, I find it corny, but also keep in mind that my neck is over 20 inches and I've never trained it directly in my life. That's just deadlifts, just rows, just hack squats, just bench presses. But again, if you want some huge, ridiculous, disproportionately big neck, just do whatever you want to do. There's no rules. A girl doing hip abductors trying to get a big butt. Should she also do hip adductors to balance things out? So first of all, your adductors are mostly like muscles in your legs. There's more than one of them, but it's mostly in your legs. So just because the machines do the opposite motion, it doesn't mean that you need to do them in some sort of a ratio to maintain like a balance so that you don't get hurt. This was a really popular idea in powerlifting back when I did it as well. Like you need to do twice as many pull downs and rows as bench presses. Nonsense. No, you don't. How did the previous generation screw us? If they did. To be honest, man, I just don't respect this mentality. And I'm not a fool. I understand that in some families there's been a car accident or cancer and it sets them back 6+ figures of medical bills. I understand that some people have crippling depression and can't string together 2 weeks of working before they quit and like have a meltdown and need to check back into the hospital. I understand that some people are wheelchair bound. I understand all these things. But the vast majority of people looking to blame previous generations, even if they did something wrong, even if they did you, are just making excuses. You're just looking for a way to shift the responsibility off of yourself. Don't make excuses. Instead of finding an excuse, find a way to get the job done. I come from a dual immigrant family on both sides. My dad came here when he was 4 years old. He used to eat out of trash cans to survive. My mom grew up in a religious commune where she wasn't allowed to live with her parents. She got out when she was 18 and graduated with a double major at 19. If you live in the United States, and this really applies to other countries too, you for sure have a parent, a grandparent, a great-grandparent, or even great-great-grandparents that have a similar story to what I just said, probably 10 times worse, that went through suffering that you can't even imagine, that pales in comparison to like your hardest thing you've had to deal with, like not getting into your number one choice college. I just, instead of blaming previous generations for not making it easy enough to succeed, why don't you fucking thank them that you're even alive to draw a single breath? Thank them for giving you a house to live under and feeding you, because a lot of people don't even get that. Instead of making excuses, just get the job done. Succeed on your own merit. Is decaf legit, or does it still have caffeine? I honestly don't know. I think they would have to disclose if it had any significant amount of caffeine. And this is going to really expose me here, but I think I have had coffee maybe 3 times in my entire life. It's such a low number that I can't even estimate it correctly. When I was a kid, I constantly bugged my mom and dad to let me have coffee. And they were like, no, coffee's for adults. Kids can't have coffee. And I'd be like, well, I want to be an adult. And anyway, one day they finally let me try coffee. I think it was probably my dad. And I found it disgusting. Just disgusting. And that formative memory lasted with me all the way through adulthood to the point where I've just never liked coffee. And I've never even tried it to see if my taste buds have changed. And I have no interest. So I don't know anything about coffee. Is there any difference between deloading for bodybuilding and powerlifting? So fundamentally, there isn't going to be any difference, right? You're reducing intensity, you're reducing volume to dissipate fatigue so that you can start a new training block. Now, in terms of the specifics, you might have different offsets, right? So you might reduce your volume by different amounts depending on the sport, or reduce your intensity by different amounts depending on the sport. It'll all come down to what you can do, the least you can do basically without causing too much detraining. So that can sometimes be a higher amount in powerlifting because the adaptation is more specific and it takes more to hold on to that adaptation. How would you personally track cooking oils? So if you're putting oil in a pot or a pan, I would measure it. You can use a little, teaspoon, tablespoon, whatever. If you're putting it in a pot, you can weigh it on a food scale. If you're using non-stick spray, just follow the instructions on the back of the bottle. It'll usually be something ridiculous like, for 1/4 of a second of a spray, you get 0.2 grams of fat. That's how I would do it. Do you plan to compete in bodybuilding? No, I just post pictures of myself on the internet in my underwear because I think it's a good time. It's just my idea of a good time. Show strangers my junk and my physique. Why not? Yes, I plan to compete in bodybuilding, my man. Yes. What do you think of the straight leg adductor machine? It's the only machine my gym has. Is this a standing straight leg adductor or a seated? Because the seated ones are still completely fine. If it's the standing one, I don't like it as much. One, it's not as stable. Two, it doesn't give you as good of a stretch, but it does train the short position better, and it's better than nothing. Where can I get that pad that I see you strap to certain machines to get more range of motion? So this is the godfather of bodybuilding pad from Charles Glass. However, it costs like $8 and it's not really worth it in my opinion. You could easily rig up something similar with like a yoga block and a band, or you could even just like find a mat that your gym has and like roll it into a little circle and then lay on it. So you can get it. It's called the godfather of bodybuilding pad, but it's not a good deal financially. Sumo versus conventional for powerlifting. Is it all just preference? It's definitely not preference, man. The vast majority of people that pull sumo pull like 10 to as much as 20% more sumo. In my experience, if you use a deadlift bar, pretty much anyone under like 5'10", 5'9" will likely pull more sumo. I think the only people that sumo doesn't potentially help are, for the most part, tall people. Please understand that this is a super complicated question and that I actually did like a 30-minute video and like 3,000 word article on sumo versus conventional for powerlifting. But generally speaking, like I said, tall people won't be able to stand wide enough to get enough of a reduction in range of motion and to get enough of a benefit to their starting leverages to make it worth it. The other thing that can happen sometimes is if people have a back that is much stronger than their legs, sometimes they can pull more conventional, or if somebody has arms that are so long relative to like their torso and legs that they already lock out just above knee height, even when doing conventional, they aren't getting any leverage advantage from switching to sumo. But for the most part, the vast majority of people will pull more sumo if they try to learn it. It seems to be popular to eat less on rest days. Do you do this? Why or why not? The number one reason that people state for doing this is that they're not training on a rest day, so they're going to need less food. But it's not really that simple, as you could be upregulating NEAT on that day, like non-exercise activity thermogenesis. You could be taking more steps. For any number of reasons, your calorie needs actually vary a decent amount from day to day. The more legit reason that I see for doing this, and it's something that I will do if I have to, is because you're going to be a little bit hungrier on your training days, which means that you can eat more food. So once you start running up into your actual limits for how much food you can eat, shifting some of your calories throughout the week so that more of it occurs on training days is going to match your appetite a little more closely than if you're eating the same thing every single day. However, if you have appetite to spare and you're hungry every day, sort of like I always have been for the most part, for me, I don't see a benefit to doing this, and so I don't do it, and I usually don't prescribe it for clients either. Any advice for tight calves? I can't fully stretch them under load. So I guess I'm just confused as to what happens when you try to stretch them under load. Does like your ankle start hurting, so it reveals to you that there's a restriction at your ankle? That's why you say ankle mobility. Does it stretch your hamstrings instead? Do your knees hurt? Because if it's something like your knees hurting, your hamstrings being stretched instead, you need to pick a different stretch. It's not necessarily that stretching your calves doesn't work. So that's about as much as I can say with the information that we've got here. All right, everybody, that's the last question for today. If you're astute, you'll notice I've made a switch over to full body training here. So I'm going to take some time and write a post about that and explain why. But in the meantime, I'm only going to be doing Q&As every other day going forward for a while because I'm only going to be training every other day for a while. So look out for that post. All right, I figured most of you don't want to go over to Instagram to read a post, so I'll just read it here. Monologue incoming. As you can tell by all the sets shown here, I'm back on a full body split. Why? Well, essentially, I accidentally discovered that it is recoverable for me. I was going to change my split from push-pull legs off to push legs off, pull off, because I was having trouble recovering from training 3 days in a row. When I went to make the switch, I did my leg day on 2 days less rest than usual, and I still PR'd every single lift. This was kind of my first and biggest clue that I had been vastly underperforming my MRV, or maximal recoverable volume. I'm very lucky in that I only need one hard set of basically any exercise to create great progression. This type of minimal volume is super easy for me to recover from. A full body split allows me to maximize frequency while taking advantage of my ability to progress on minimal volumes. After all, if I can progress every muscle group on an every other day full body split with one hard set, this rate of progress is twice as fast as doing the same thing every 4 days on a PPL split. The vast change in my recovery ability here comes from because I've lost 50 pounds off my peak off-season weight, and I'm just flat out not as fat anymore. I've done lots of cardio the entire time, and my work capacity is through the roof compared to where it was previously. Bring these factors together with my very low volume needs, and you have the perfect recipe for someone who can benefit from a full body split. I'll basically milk this split for all that it's worth. My first full body linear progression as a novice produced tremendous results, and I'm very excited and interested to see what happens when I undergo the same process now that I'm enhanced. I'm basically taking this as a personal challenge to see how far I can extend linear progression. All right, everybody, that's the end of the video. If you like the video, leave any questions or comments below, and I will answer them as soon as I can. Subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, my friends, have a great day. Peace.